Hi, this is John Stein, Executive Director of the Open Voice Network, and we're making voice worthy of user trust. This is the Future of Voice podcast. And today we're excited to welcome back Shilp Agarwal, the founder and CEO of Blutag, for a second episode here in the podcast. If you missed the first one, please go take a listen, I should say, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. But for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting Shilp, serial entrepreneur, 15 years and more of experience. He's a retailer and he's a voice technologist, a wonderful combination. Through his leadership and vision, Blutag has grown into a leading voice commerce platform. They help brands deliver branded voice-based shopping experiences for their customers. They're a no-code platform, important to note, and they've already integrated into most of the in-market e-commerce platforms such as Shopify, BigCommerce, Salesforce, Commerce Cloud, and more. Shilp, thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, John. It's always good to be here, and it's always great to see you. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. Let's start by just going back to a topic perhaps we touched on in our earlier conversation about the shopper journey and where voice and your solution and your platform intersect with that shopper journey. So many people kind of want to equate the value of a solution with only the transaction, and yet I think you would suggest there's a whole lot more than just the transaction revenue that creates value. Please.
Yeah. So, John, I think last time I think we talked a little bit about this. I think it's more about when you look at from a customer's point of view or their perspective, it's really just about convenience and ease, right? How they interact and connect with the brand is all about how they feel connected with them, right? So when users find a convenient way to do something, it generally becomes a behavior, and some of those behaviors are pretty irreversible, right? So when we initially started, looking at these voice assistants and building Blutag, our goal was to see what are these kind of behaviors that are getting formed, right? So, starting back at Alexa and Google Assistant, we looked at what those were. And those were, simple tasks, right? So things that people were doing were, they were checking the weather, they were setting the alarm, they were turning their lights
Right.
on and off, right? And those were behaviors, but those were tasks. And the approach that we had taken was that how do we, what are these shopping related tasks that can tap into that kind of a user behavior? And that's exactly what we did, right? So we looked at these quick tasks, which were, things that get used the most are quickly being able to reorder something, checking your order status, skipping a subscription. This necessarily, some of them equate directly to a transaction, but some of these are just really about convenience and them knowing that, hey, my brand can listen to me and that I can, get my answers, really quickly. So that's kind of how we've always looked at that.
I mean, a very important point you're making. The brand is listening to me as opposed to talking at me. They're listening to me and enabling me to do, well, perhaps simple tasks, but very important tasks very quickly and easily. What do you see as this grows, Shilp, and you've seen this over the past many years? What's the next step of those tasks? What's the next set of behaviors that you and your clients are seeing will be, to a degree, automated or made simpler through voice?
So I think now, and I think, I'm sure we'll get into that, just like, most of the conversations that, end up talking a lot about the chat GPT and LLM models is, but I think it is going to become a lot more conversational. It's going to move from being just task related to more things that are more intent based actions, if that makes sense, right? So you are able to express what your intentions are, and let the conversational assistant, whether it's a voice bot, voice assistant or a chat bot, let it do and perform those actions for you essentially.
And that may be more in search, that may be more in help me, how do I build the deck, how do I do this, how do I do that? Is it getting into much more of kind of the solutioning for the consumers?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways to look at it. One is that it's content, right? So content is already kind of getting formed by whether you're creating like your email marketing tool. Let's say you use an email marketing system, like whether it's Klaviyo or
Yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah.
They're all incorporating large language models. Let's say ChatGPT for now, for instance, and which helps you create better emails. It helps you create better content, right? and those are going to be kind of table stakes at that point. But I think when we start looking at, how do you let that turn into an action is kind of where the exciting part is. How do you take some information that's kind of like, I wouldn't really call it a black box, but that's kind of what it is, right? Like these are large language models that have a lot of information. It's the new search, right? How do you take that and make them a little bit more actionable is kind of where it's going to be.
So you're sitting down with clients, and we were just chatting before we started this. Several months ago, it was, well, where's voice going to go? And then all of a sudden, boom, here's
Yeah,
ChatGPT.
exactly.
And you're sitting down with clients. What were they saying to you? It was like, what's going on? What is this? I mean, what's been the conversation?
Is this for the ChatGPT stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, when we start just really looking at kind of, what do we think about Chat GPT? Like, what does this mean, right? I think, and this conversation happens probably several times a day in a lot of households, and in my mine it does. But for a long time, people have always talked about AGI, right? Like how AGI is going to be what is going to make machines think and act like humans, right? Like
Hmm.
using generative AI was not really the how most of the people thought it was eventually going to go, right? Including people like Jan LeCun, right? Like it was always about AGI, right? But when you start looking at these models like GPT-4, this is the way forward, right?
Yeah.
This is how you will have AI and machines kind of get pretty close to AGI, if you want to call that, right? And it's literally going to impact everything we do, right? And like I mentioned, user expectations on how you interact with information has changed forever, right? And my perspective is just that, just like everything else, it will impact digital commerce in a huge way, right? Probably the biggest change since the internet, right? I mean, if I just look at my behavior, right? I mean, my behavior has changed since ChatGPT. I mean, I would, when I have to create a blog post, and again, I'm giving too much information out, but when I would do a blog post, I would always have somebody do a little bit of research on some information for me. I
Sure.
would write my initial draft. I'll have somebody overlook it. We'll do a little bit of back and forth, and in a couple of days, I'll have a blog, right? But now, I mean, I really just put some thoughts in Chat GPT. It gives me some initial,
Boom.
it sends me some initial draft back with the information that I need, and I have a blog ready in a couple of hours, right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
saving
Yeah.
hours and hours, and it's really good, John. Like the it's really good. So, when
You
you
say, gosh, how could it be that good? Was I that
yeah,
bad? But yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And just like that, when you start looking at e-commerce and shopping, customers will expect to interact with shopping carts and product catalogs in a different manner. They will have different expectations of how they find products, how they build their shopping carts. And if you are a retailer that has a decent sized product catalog, it's not very small, you have to incorporate generative AI into your platform. Users will expect that, right? And that's what it is.
I think it's, you just said something, I think, just a few minutes ago that's so important. It changing forever how we interact with information, how, in a sense, we create knowledge, and especially for a retailer who is selling products, but products to meet needs that are broader than perhaps the products.
Hmm.
Always the story that you go in to buy a hammer. No, you're really going in to build a deck. The hammer is a tool to build the deck. A kind of
Exactly.
old retail cliche, but it gets to that with the large language models and
Yep.
across
Exactly.
your product range. The way you interact with product and intent and desire, all that changes. I mean, am I correct? As you're seeing that?
Completely changes, right? Like, I mean, when we did when we focused initially on really helping them quickly add items to their shopping cart, let's take an example of grocery customers, for example, right? Being able to quickly be in your kitchen, you have a voice assistant, say that, hey, can you add milk to my cart? Can you add butter to my cart? Those are great, right? Those help you increase cart sizes. But now, now what we are offering to customers is very different, right? Now it is something a lot more enhanced. So now, let's say you're shopping online and you have people coming over for dinner next week, and you want to build a shopping cart, right? That process online is not very easy, right? You really don't know how many how many onions do you need, like how much cheese do I need, right? All you know is I got 10 people coming over next week. I need to cook Mexican dinner for them. I have a couple of people that are vegetarian, and now you actually can just say that, and it's going to build the cart for you. And that's what we're offering now, as opposed to what we were offering a few months ago in addition to that, right? So now what we say is that we helped you capture intent, or we helped you capture impulse before this, right? And now we're adding and saying that, okay, you can give me your intent, and I'll further just build the whole thing for you. So that's where the change is, that that incremental change that we saw because of being able to capture impulse. Now we're literally going to change how you build your carts. So yeah.
Huge change, just an enormous change, and it's tied back to the original point we're talking about. The need of the consumer is far more than the impulse. Of course, there's the impulse, but you have this greater need as a consumer to meet certain needs, to host the dinner party, to build the deck, to do all that. And now with a large language model, generative AI, this is giving that back to you and
Mhm.
building your list, telling you what you didn't think about, adding the wine, whatever that may be. I mean, it's a whole new world potentially for the retail consumer interaction.
Absolutely, completely it is. Yeah.
What's next? What do you see as the next 2 to 3 big steps, Shilp, using generative AI, large language models in all their various forms, and even domain specific language models within a retailer's assortment? What do you see as the next steps? What would you broad advice that you're giving to people, steps you're taking? What's in front of you?
So, when we start looking at, and again, I'll go a little bit into kind of, our customers, right? The brands that we work with, right? And how has their mindset changed because of generative AI, right? What are they thinking now, right? So I think what's happened is that conversational AI was something that, we always believed was really good for brands, right? And I think, if we put it in simple terminology, it's now gone from a vitamin to a painkiller, right? Conversational AI. And it's something that was it was something that was really good to have. Brands that used it well, that we worked with, they also increased retention revenue, they also increased customer engagement. But now I think it's literally for survival, right? You are competing in a different world. It's literally, kind of like, how things have changed, since the pandemic, and a lot of those things are permanent, like working, hybrid models,
Yeah,
working from
yeah,
home models.
yeah, yeah.
But a lot of things are kind of going back to normal. But I think this is, I think, a bigger change because this is permanent. you
Uh,
know,
from a vitamin to a painkiller. I'm going to do my best to steal that. It's a great analogy for what everyone in the industry is facing.
yeah.
And especially as you're talking about the pains of business and being able to reduce and mitigate and eliminate those, let's talk about kind of the ethical pains that are out there as we deal with large language models, generative AI, and the like. What are your clients asking you about? What are some of the steps you're taking?
Yeah, so I think anytime you introduce a brand new technology, I think the immediate concerns that come from these, companies and brands is about privacy and data, right? Like that's the
Yeah,
first thing that comes to you. Whether it's you're, introducing facial recognition, whether it's you saving a credit card, like it's the first thing. That's the first thing that comes in, right? And but I think right now also, combine that with the fact that they're also trying to figure out what is the right approach to get involved in this new world, right? Because they know that it's impacting their industry. There's no doubt about that, right? Like, but how do they get involved? Because there's just so much noise out there, right? There are literally thousands of new companies being founded every day, and they're all doing generative AI, right?
yeah,
And
yes, yeah,
and like I said, like a lot of them are, bulk of them are around the content creation part of it. And like I said, it helps you write better emails. These are like knowledge bots essentially. But these are all going to be table stakes, right? And I think what these brands need to look at when you talked about the vertical focused is that how do you take this knowledge that you're getting from these large language models, and what are your goals with that, right? So, and that's kind of what we do, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of how we look at it, is that what we are building is generative AI, and we've been building our GPT based model. We've been training it for almost 3 years now, right? So this is pre the craze, right? And our AI model is goal oriented, and essentially you can think about that it's a generative AI model that's goal oriented, and it directs people to buy products, right? And and where the differentiator will be for these brands is that how do you take the knowledge that you get from these open models and combine that with a vertically focused AI that then becomes a goal oriented solution for you, which can help you personalize, customize, and provide that elevated, unique experience to your customers.
One platform. No one platform is going to do it. No one language model is going to do it. You have vertical specific, you have broad general. You're bringing those together, but again, it's to the purpose of bringing people to product and then
Mhm.
ringing the cash register.
Exactly.
Shilp, let's talk about the ethical issues, the protection of privacy, the protection of data, how that all fits together, please.
So, I mean, I think, John, this is something that you and me we've talked about over, the last year. Every time we've even met, and even when we've spoken over the phone, is that we've always, that's been a big priority for us since the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
Especially, when we start looking at the way we got started with this, right? We got started initially by building a product around Alexa, and it was extremely important for our customers to make sure that their data was protected against Amazon, right? And we built this system to almost act as a firewall
Yeah.
between the product catalogs and Amazon, right? And this fits really nicely into the current model that we're adding on, which is about these LLMs, right? So when brands use our AI model, right, any of the PII or their order history data is not shared with any of these public LLMs, or for that matter, across other brands. And the other question that we had also touched a little bit about was about the transparent the transparency and accountability that has become really important, right? And what should the brands do to kind of get ahead of the curve, right? And how can we create these safeguards? So I think the first thing and foremost thing that the brands have to do is that they have to really let their customers know that they're using generative AI, and they
Hmm.
need to tell them exactly what they're using it for, right? And also make sure that you're not sharing any personal information into a public LLM, right? And 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 at the same time, you should be able to disconnect your data from an LLM as and when you please. Because I mean, right now everything is all about ChatGPT, but we really don't know how this is going to end up, right? Like, is ChatGPT going to be the way we do it? I mean, if AI becomes, if these, I mean, I don't know if you recently read that. I mean, Google admitted in their internal letter that they didn't really have a moat in this whole
Yeah.
space, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They, and if generative AI and this LLM is a commodity, at that point, are we moving towards a world which essentially just becomes like the storage war between Azure and AWS, where it's just a pricing thing, right? I mean, if they're going to be all the same, then if I'm today using ChatGPT, maybe next year I'm using Bard, or maybe I'm using something else, right? And at that point, when these brands are trying to figure out about what can they do and what steps they need to take, they need to make sure that they're, like I said, not sharing any personal information or PII
Absolutely.
into these LLMs. At the same time, they should know that they can disconnect from them whenever
Mhm.
they want without leaving any traces behind. And I
Without
think the
leaving
first,
it, yes.
and that's how they have to think about it, because like I said, we don't know, this is too early to figure out whether it's going to, and so many different schools of thought, right? Is the pricing going to get cheaper? Is it going to get more
Yeah.
expensive? Right? We don't
Yeah.
know, right? So how do we do that? Is by you have to realize that things are moving really fast. Brands already know that they might be working on something that's probably going to be obsolete in a couple of months. So all you can do is make sure that you're handling your data in a proper, ethical, transparent manner, and so that you are protecting your data and your customers' data.
All you can do, and I can just repeat back what you said, the most important thing you can do is to be protecting the data of your client and their customers. And again, with full understanding that, you toss it into the pool with everything else, you start to lose any and all of that protection. So
Yep.
major issues here for all of us. And Shilp, you're just very wise in bringing that forward and making this podcast aware of your position, but also certainly in dealing with your clients. We strongly support your position on that. No question. Friends, we've been talking with Shilp Agarwal, the co-founder and CEO of Blutag. Shilp, thank you so much again for your time. I look forward to the next time we get together.
All right.
Friends,
Thank you, John.
Future of Voice podcast. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.